Presentation of the day is Riley Nowokowski. Now, Riley's doing double duty at this conference, but today is his solo presentation. He's a PhD candidate at Western University in London, and he loves all types of sport but takes a particular interest in baseball history. His work is focused largely on sport during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Riley?
Hey, I'm Riley Nowokowski. I'm a PhD candidate. Bob Barney is my supervisor, so I've just got to write my thesis, and this is some of the research from my thesis. I'm mostly interested in narrowing in baseball in the 1920s, especially in London, because it was a pretty vibrant baseball scene. So I guess today's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to go over what indoor baseball is, who promoted it and how it was promoted, and where the game of baseball was played, indoor baseball was played. So if you're a researcher and you type in indoor baseball into Google, you probably will encounter a page like this in an encyclopedia that says that by the 1920s, indoor baseball was a dead sport. But hopefully through this presentation, we'll be able to see that that's actually not the truth, and that it was a sport that was thriving throughout the 1920s, especially in London, Ontario. All right. So that's the plan. We're going to go through what it is, how it's played, where it's played. This is a photo from the Spalding Guide to Indoor Baseball, one of my main sources of information, and it's kind of important because it shows an indoor baseball game being played outdoors. But the most important aspect is that you're looking at the size of the diamond. I'll get to it later, but that's like one of the most defining features, most important defining features of the sport is that it can be played in these small spaces with a smaller baseball diamond and different positions and whatnot. So there's going to be a couple walls of text, but I've highlighted the most important parts that sort of point out what the point or how indoor baseball can be played and what it is. So notably, it can be played in a hall of any size. So that's important because it's a winter sport. The composition of the playing field is immaterial as long as you buy the shoes that Spalding is selling with rubber feet. So although it can be played in any hall, the ideal floor space is 40 by 50 feet. And so the next one gives us a little bit more detail about the sport specifically itself from the Spalding Guide. So we've got to note that the bases are only half filled with sand. The home plate is made of rubber. The bases aren't affixed to the ground, so if they're slid into, they can move. The distance from home to second and from third to first base is 38.5 feet. The distance so it's a much smaller baseball diamond, essentially. The ideal dimensions of the playing field are 27 feet for each side of the diamond, and the distance from home to second and first to third is 38.25 feet. So obviously, if you're going to go and play the game of indoor baseball in the 1920s, you might buy something like the Spalding Guide, where it tells you all about what implements you need to play or what's different about the sport. So the ball was different. It was made of a more compact substance. It was 7-inch. I'm not a big stats implementation nerd, so I don't know how big of a difference the ball here is, but I'm assured that it's different. So it's 7 inches in circumference. It weighs only 8.25 ounces, and it's made supposedly to leave no damage to whatever it's hit against in the indoors. So I don't know how true that is. And the bat, obviously the bat has specific dimensions as well. So I think it says that it can only be 2 3/4 feet long. And then there's a diameter dimension as well. So you would need these tools, so to say, to play the game of indoor baseball. You could play it with anything else, but Spalding, he really wants you to pick up his manual and place an order, right? But the game itself is a little bit different because it's small size, because of the compact baseball, the type of bat. It's considered a really fast sport, and that some of the positions are even played differently. This is from 1903, so you have two shortstops, and this is the right fielder coming in and playing what's known as right short, because obviously quicker paced game, so the ball's flying, and I believe that that would be the rationale for that. So you get the Spalding guide, and these are the guides that you would get from Spalding. You would send away or buy them, and he published the indoor guides. From my research, I found the earliest one was 1903, but there's like self-references within the 1903 guide, which makes me think that they were publishing it before then, like these rules and the important implements and that type of thing. But these are the only ones that are available in the Library of Congress. And he publishes it all the way to 1926, so I don't think that it's like a dead sport, and it's actually being sort of well supported by the documentation that exists. So if you were to play this game, you would need a space, and they even talk about what an indoor baseball is, and they said that it was an ideal sport that had its origin in an armory. The sport of indoor baseball has a sort of foundational story that more people should research, because it's sort of the same, not the same foundational story of proper baseball, but it has this interesting foundational story, and it ties into this armory, and so you need a space to play it. London has a space to play it. Obviously, the armory was built in 1839 in London, Ontario. So this is the Indoor Baseball League in London. So this is an announcement on the 27th of December, 1919, acknowledging that there's going to be a new season or a new league in the new year. January 8th, you have the new schedule. So we've got 8 different teams listed, and they represent a whole wide variety of local sort of establishments, businesses. So you've got the Grand Trunk Railroad, a team called the Santa Claras, the Dowlers, the Canadian Army Medical Corps, the Public Utilities Commission, which is a formal branch of the municipal government, Army and Navy, a team called the Tecumsehs, and the Princess Pat's Light Infantry was added further along in the season. And they had 2 teams, so there's a wide representation of teams from a bunch of different walks of life. But it is sort of rooted in that military, under that military banner. So here, the third one, this is an article saying that we're going to have some real baseball. Oh, and the Knights of Columbus was another team. And they always talk about how the games are going to be fast and quick, and the ball is going to be hit hard. Obviously, they had to sell it because the season was short, only 8 or 9 games long. It only went from January till April. And then there was some more stuff. We'll get to that. So January to April. The champion of the league was this local organization called the Dowlers, and they beat the Canadian Army Medical Corps in a very quick game. But that wasn't like the end of this season. The season was kind of like a pretty boring, average, but it was well reported in the newspaper, well attended, and after this there was enough interest in it that London was going to play Hamilton for the indoor championship. So I only do research on London, so to me this shows that there's somewhat of a thriving indoor baseball scene in Ontario, if there's enough of a setting where London can play Hamilton for a championship. So what happens is London has what they call the picked 9. So they took the 9 best players from the entire league of all of these teams, and they played against this championship team from Hamilton. So it was really, really well reported in the newspaper, and this is perceived as this important game, and you've got information on them working out. You've got notice that over 1,000 tickets have been sold to the game, that there's an elaborate music program with a 20-piece orchestra, and there's going to be an informal dance. So the The mayor of London, A.T. Little, is there. He's going to be there to throw out the first pitch. It's going to be caught by E.V. Buchanan, who's the head of the Public Utilities Commission, really supportive of this playground and sports movement that's growing in London, Ontario. So if you guys had to guess how the final game went, who would you say won? Just hands up if London won. And hands up for Hamilton. All right. So they played, they had their pick 9, and it was this big and important event. And London lost 33-0. Yeah. So I think it's just like this perfect ending to this story. There's this great interest in local baseball or indoor baseball, this following of it, and London just gets absolutely destroyed by Hamilton in the final game. And the league folds after this, but the game of indoor baseball in London doesn't disappear. It falls under that military banner for the next season. And in 1921, it's called the Garrison Indoor Baseball League. And there's more military teams. And the rationale given was that this league was not stable enough, and that the military offers the stability needed for teams moving forward. So all in all, London lost. Indoor baseball is an important thing in London and in Southwestern and in Ontario. More research needs to be done on teams outside of London, into the foundational stories, and there's a lot of space for scholarship that can be done. I only found a couple of articles that have been written about indoor baseball. So there's a lot of work that can and should be done in regards to indoor baseball. So that was a lot quicker than I thought, but I did it through. So, any questions? Yes?
Did I hear correctly?
Wait.
Okay. Did I hear correctly? You said one of the teams was named Princess?
Yeah, the Princess Pat's Light Infantry.
So does that mean that there were women playing in this thing?
No, that's a military infantry, I don't know if it's a division or battalion that was in the military. And there's a bunch of these military teams, the Army and Navy team. One of the sad things is that as I'm working through the documents, they're bringing back the league after the end of the First World War. It's December, so the end of the war is very fresh. They're talking about organizing these teams, and they say the Army team that existed or the militia team that existed before the war would have been a great addition, but they lost too many people in the war, so they're going to take the people that are left over and sprinkle them out throughout the team. So there was that connection to the armory and to the military. Yeah.
Product. I saw an image at the beginning there. It looked like an underhand pitcher. What was the pitching distance, and was it underhand pitching? Right there.
I'm not sure what the exact pitching distance is. I've got the picture of the diamond on my first, so you can.
Picture. It looked like an underhand pitch.
Yeah, I think it's 23. And I'm not sure about the pitching style. That I tried to pick up on that when I was reading, and I'm not sure if they mentioned it. I apologize, Chip. Yep.
The article you had up at the end said there was some controversy about how Hamilton was pitching. I couldn't really read the article.
Okay,
What
yes.
is the story behind that?
That's pretty typical for London newspapers if they lose to sort of pull out the reasons, make excuses for the reasons as
Years ago.
Nothing recent. Whether it was pitching or otherwise, what rules would be different to lend this game to such a small playing surface inside?
There wasn't. That's why it's so comparable to baseball. There's not a significant amount of other rules. They encouraged sliding, they encouraged bunting, they encouraged fast running, they encouraged running to first base if there was a passed ball. So everything that I encountered, other than bringing in this right fielder to accommodate for the smaller space.
What about like fielding off of ceilings or off of walls and things like that?
I'm not sure about that. See, and that's the thing that's interesting. There needs to be like more work done on this. Yes.
I play indoor softball in Toronto, in one of those domes, the golf domes. And the play is off the ceiling.
Okay. Yes.
So, you're speaking to it being a dead game. I can tell you that so much research that I was doing into baseball in World War I and World War II, I would run into indoor games. Canadian troops were playing indoor games a lot overseas during both World Wars. During the Second World War, one of the guys who played indoor baseball a whole lot ended up being my Cub Scout leader in the 1980s in Georgetown, Ontario. And he would take us into the basement of the church and say, we're going to play indoor baseball. Boys, I learned this in the service. It's going to make you a tougher man. And he would tell us to play the game, overhand pitching, as hard as you could was the goal, so always overhand pitching. Any ball, no matter where it was hit, you could catch it, it would be an out. And then his version was, in the Army, he says, they were told to run backwards. So you hit the ball and run third, second, first. So instinctually, we would hit the ball and run first, and we broke his brain. He just put the bat to the wall one day, screaming and yelling at us. So we were playing it in the 80s.
You are right about there being that military connection, and I'm not like a military historian, so there's got to be someone who is more prepared to explore that than me, because the place it took place in, the armories, the teams, the makeup of those teams, that sort of thing is something that could be more deeply explored. Yeah. Yep.
Was the ball designed for regular flight or is it a limited flight ball?
I'm not certain about that. The advertisement that I've got here, it's only a portion of this advertisement. So you've got the official ball, but you could also buy balls that were wrapped with different versions of leather. You could buy a sheepskin ball and a leather ball, a cow leather ball, and there was one more underneath that. So I'm not 100% certain.
Just to follow that up, I think, I may have misread this, because one of your slides where you talk about the rules for the ball and the bat, I believe it said the ball had to be 17 inches in circumference. So that's a pretty big ball.
Yeah, it's, see, and I'm not,
It's gotta be
There
softer.
it is, right there.
yeah.
It must be softer. There.
It's gonna be a soft-centered ball too.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
It says a compact substance, so,
Yeah, it's gotta be like this.
and, yeah.
It only weighs half a pound, so it's gotta be pretty
Anything
soft.
goes from the normal ball, it's so fast,
Anyone else?
it's like bouncing a rifle ball across the building.
No problem.